What's up, everyone, and welcome back to the Oak Tree Football Channel. The 2020 NFL Draft ended last night, and some teams picked very well while others didn't. I decided to grade each team's draft and then rank them from worst to best, so now let's get right into it, starting with number 32, the Green Bay Packers. I gave the Packers a D-. Sorry, Packers fans, but I think you drafted the worst this season. I think some of the players they took were good picks, but they just didn't take them in the right spot. Heading into the draft, you probably would have expected some of the Packers' first picks to be receiver and offensive tackle, but they didn't take receiver the whole draft and didn't take tackle until the 6th round. They took running backs and quarterback as some of their first picks, which could make sense, but it would have been a lot better picks if they had taken those positions later in the draft. It just wasn't the best draft this year for the Green Bay Packers. Next, coming in with a D, I have the Las Vegas Raiders. I think the Raiders took players in the right positions, except for maybe outside linebacker, but they just didn't take the right players. Henry Ruggs wasn't the right receiver for them, Damon Arnette wasn't the best cornerback, and I don't think Tanner Muse was the best safety either. The Raiders had a lot of better choices than the players they picked, and this draft really didn't help their chances for next season. Next, I have the Falcons coming in with a D+. The Falcons' picks were better in the 2nd and 3rd round, but I think that they reached on A.J. Terrell, and in the 4th to 7th round, the picks just weren't good. They didn't take anyone to fill some of their biggest holes at defensive end and outside linebacker, and I just think it was a really poor draft by the Falcons. Next, coming in with a C-, I have the Seattle Seahawks. In the video where I ranked the first-round picks, I said the Seahawks made the worst first-round pick, and the rest of the picks weren't too good either. Damian Lewis wasn't a bad pick, but it still could have been a lot better for the Seahawks this draft. Next, also with the C-, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers. The picks for Pittsburgh weren't great, but they weren't too bad either. I think the only one that will really have an immediate impact is Chase Claypool, their wide receiver. I don't think he'll be great, but I think he will be the best of the draft class for Pittsburgh. The Steelers could have drafted a lot better this year, I think. Next, coming in with a C, I have the Houston Texans. The first 2 picks for the Texans were good, but the others weren't great. Ross Blacklock can be really good for them, I think, but I don't think the other players will make much of an impact. The Texans' free agency period wasn't great, and the draft didn't look like it helped their team much either. Next up, also with the C, I have the Buffalo Bills. Not having a first-round pick made it harder for the Bills this draft, but they just didn't take the right positions. The A.J. Epineza pick was almost perfect for them, but the rest didn't make much sense. Taking quarterback Jake Fromm in the 4th and then kicker Tyler Bass in the 5th were just confusing. They could have taken bigger positions of need and then gotten these positions later in the draft. Next up, I have the Patriots coming in with a C+. I was surprised that the Patriots didn't take a quarterback or wide receiver in the whole draft, and I think some of the picks they made just weren't the right decision. Like getting 2 tight ends in the 2nd round or taking positions like outside linebacker when they needed quarterback or wide receiver or defensive tackle. It just wasn't the best draft for the Patriots this year. Next up, I have the Rams, also with the C+. I think Cam Akers and Van Jefferson were both okay picks, and I think Terrell Lewis was a really good pick, but most of the other picks just weren't great. I think Bryson Hopkins is a really good player, but the Rams didn't really need a tight end. Just like some of these other teams, it could have been a lot better draft for the Rams. Next up, coming in with the first B, I have the Tennessee Titans. The Titans' first pick wasn't great, but I think some of the other picks were good. I think Christian Fulton could have been a first-rounder, so that was a great pick, and Larry Murchison in the 5th round was also a solid pick. Next up is the San Francisco 49ers coming in with a B. Javon Kinlaw was an okay pick, and it was the same with Brandon Ayuk, but the rest of the picks weren't great. They didn't have that many picks overall, but still, I think they could have drafted a lot better. I think Ayuk can have a really good season, but I'm still not sure if this was the best draft for the 49ers. Next up is the New Orleans Saints coming in with a B. With most of the picks the Saints had, they drafted really well, but they got a B because of their lack of picks. The Cesar Ruiz pick was questionable, but Zach Bond and Adam Troutman are both really good players and should fit well into the Saints roster. Next up, I have the Chargers also coming in with a B. The Chargers drafted who they think will be their franchise quarterback in Justin Herbert, which wasn't the best value pick, I think, but trading back into the first round and getting Kenneth Murray was a really good pick. They didn't pick again until the fourth round, though, but in the fourth, they got running back Joshua Kelly, who I think can be a really good player. Next is the Kansas City Chiefs, also with a B. Coming off a Super Bowl win, the Chiefs drafted the best they could. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire was a great pick, and I think the same with Willie Gay Jr. Lucas Niang was also a solid pick in the third round, but I was surprised they didn't take a cornerback until the seventh. Next up, coming in with a B once again, I have the Chicago Bears. Cole Kmet wasn't the best pick for the Bears, especially after they paid Jimmy Graham, but getting Jalen Johnson was one of the best picks in the second round. They didn't have any third or fourth round picks, but they made good picks in the fifth round, like getting Darrell Mooney. Coming in with the first B+, I have the Washington Redskins. Washington drafted the best player in the draft, in my opinion, and that wasn't the only good player they got. In the fourth round, they got Sadiq Charles, who I think can be very solid for them, and later in the fourth, they got Antonio Gandy-Golden, who I think is a really solid receiver. The draft really improved the Redskins. Next up, also with the B+, is the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles had some questionable picks early in the draft, but I think they only had one really bad one, which was Jalen Hurts. Jalen Reagor wasn't the best pick, but I don't think it was too bad, and Davion Taylor looked pretty good in college. Kayvon Wallace is solid, Jack Driscoll is solid. Getting Prince Tega Wanogho in the sixth round was a good pick also. They also looked like they were going after speed at the receiver positions, since they drafted John Hightower and Quez Watkins in the later rounds, along with Jalen Reagor in the first. Next up, the Giants, also coming in with a B+. I wasn't the biggest fan of the Giants' first pick where they took Andrew Thomas, because I think they were better offensive tackles, but I really think Xavier McKinney will make a huge impact. I think Xavier McKinney will be very, very good, and I think Shane Lemieux in the fifth round was a great pick also. I don't think it was the best possible draft for the Giants, but I definitely don't think it was a bad draft. And the final B+ is the Miami Dolphins. Some of the Dolphins' first-round picks weren't great, but most of their other picks were good. They got the quarterback of their future in Tua Tagovailoa, and they also got some help on the offensive line like Austin Jackson and Robert Hunt and Solomon Kinley. They also brought in Curtis Weaver in the fifth round, which I think was a really good pick. So for the first A-, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jaguars took C.J. Henderson and Caleb Von Chase on in the first round, both two really good players and filling needs for the team, and then getting Laviska Shenault, in my opinion, one of the best receivers in the draft in the second round. They also got Devon Hamilton in the third, Ben Barch in the fourth, Josiah Scott also in the fourth, Shaquille Quarterman in the fourth. A lot of the players that the Jaguars drafted this draft were just really average players, and they were all solid picks, and that's why I give them an A-. Next, also with an A-, I have the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts didn't have a first-round pick, but still they drafted surprisingly well, starting it off with Michael Pittman Jr., the wide receiver. I think there were some better wide receivers they could have taken, but Pittman Jr. is still a great pick for them, and he will make a big impact in his first season. Then they got Jonathan Taylor, who I was a bit surprised that they took a running back, but Jonathan Taylor is one of the best running backs in this draft, and he should get a lot, well, maybe not a lot, but he should get some carries for them. They got Eason in the fourth round. I think it was good that they got a quarterback, and Eason makes a lot of sense for them. And they also got Julian Blackmon in the third round, who's a solid safety. It was a pretty solid draft. They just, two holes they didn't fill, which I think they should have filled, was defensive end and tight end, but still, solid draft by the Colts. Next is the Panthers, who also had an A-. The Panthers, Derek Brown was a really good pick. I think it would have been better if it had been Isaiah Simmons, as I've said before, but still a great pick. Yetur Gross-Matos was a great pick in the second round. I really like Jeremy Chin. I think that was a good pick with the final pick in the second round. They didn't have a third-round pick. Troy Pride is solid. They drafted the first XFL player in Kenny Robinson. I liked what Kenny Robinson did in the XFL. That could be a good pick. So, good picks by the Panthers. Nothing great, but nothing bad either. And the final team to get an A- is the Cleveland Browns. The Browns had some very good picks early. Jedrick Wills at pick number 10. I think he was the best offensive tackle in the class. That was just a really good pick that they were able to get him at 10. In the second round, they got Grant Delpit, who I think he's arguably the best safety in this draft, and they really needed safety. That was a really good pick. Jordan Elliott in the 3rd round. Jordan Elliott is really, really good out of Missouri. The other picks weren't as good. Harrison Bryant was a solid pick. Donovan Peoples-Jones in the 6th round was a solid pick. The other picks weren't great, but they weren't necessarily bad. That's why I gave the Browns an A-. Now, the first team to get an A is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They started it off with Tristan Wirfs, who was arguably the best offensive tackle in the draft, and in the 2nd round, they got top safety Antoine Winfield Jr. They also got Keyshawn Vaughn in the 3rd round, who can be a great backup running back, and Tyler Johnson somehow fell to them in the 4th round. Johnson is a great receiver and will add to their already great receiving core. Next, the Jets also got an A. I think the Jets drafted really well throughout the whole draft, like taking Mekhi Becton early and being able to get one of the best receivers in the draft in Denzel Mims late in the 2nd round. Ashton Davis is also a really good safety, and with the rumors about Jamal Adams leaving soon, this was a really good pick. I really like Jabari Zuniga, and I also like Bryce Hall, so them being able to get him in the 5th round was a great pick. Next up, I have the Detroit Lions, also with an A. The later rounds for the Lions could have been better, but the first 3 were really good. Jeff Okudah could be a top player in the league, and he'll probably be a starter this season, and DeAndre Swift could be a great player also. They also got Julian Okwara and Jonah Jackson, who are both good, and those first 4 players will probably all be starters this season. Staying in the NFC North, the Vikings are up next. They also got an A. Justin Jefferson falling to them was great, and after they traded down, they got Jeff Gladney, who's also solid. They filled their hole at offensive tackle with Ezra Cleveland, and were able to get some solid cornerbacks like Cameron Dantzler. I also really like Troy Dye and James Lynch, and they are great picks in the 4th round. Next up with an A, I have the Denver Broncos. For most of the draft, the Broncos looked like they were trying to make Drew Lock's life easier for this season and in the future. In the first 4 rounds, they drafted 2 top receivers, 1 tight end, and 1 top center. Later in the draft, they also took Netane Mutai and Tyree Cleveland, and on the defensive side of the ball, they got Michael Ojemudia and McTelvin Agam, along with some other players, and it was a very, very good draft by the Broncos this season. Next up is the Dallas Cowboys, also coming in with an A. The Cowboys could have gotten an A+, but I decided to give them an A in the end. The Cowboys had one of the best drafts this year, starting with getting CeeDee Lamb at pick number 17, which was a very, very good pick, and then getting Trayvon Diggs in the 2nd round was also great, since the Cowboys really needed good cornerback. They lost their number 1 cover corner in Byron Jones, and they only had 7 interceptions last season anyway. I was surprised to see Neville Gallimore fall to them in the 3rd, so I think that was an easy pick for them, and I think Tyler Biadasz will be a really good player for them. Their free agency wasn't great, but this draft might help them win the NFC East this season. Next, also coming in with an A, I have the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals started the draft with one of the best players available in Joe Burrow, and in the 2nd round they got a great player in T. Higgins, and they also got some other great linebackers later. The only bad part of the draft for them was they didn't take offensive tackle until the 6th round, but it was still a really good draft by Cincinnati this year. Another A here, I have the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals were somehow able to get Isaiah Simmons in the 1st round, and even though they didn't have a 2nd round pick, getting Josh Jones in the 3rd was one of the best picks of the entire draft. Some would say he's a 1st round talent, and since the Cardinals passed on a tackle in the 1st round, they were still able to get a really good one later in the draft. And finally, the only A+ of the whole draft, I gave the A+ to the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens usually draft well, and they did it again this year. Getting Patrick Queen at number 28 was the steal of the 1st round, and in the 2nd round, even though they had bigger holes in running back, they got Mark Ingram's replacement with one of the best running backs in this year's draft. Justin Madubuike is solid, and Devin Duvernay really fits the Ravens team. Ben Bredeson and Tyree Phillips will be able to help protect Lamar Jackson, and I think James Prochet will be a great pick in the 6th round. The Ravens draft is really good, and I think it was the best in the NFL this season. So that is going to wrap it up for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, don't forget to leave a like. If you haven't already, please subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.